Let's take an introductory look at how we can use Vex inside of Cops to do some various things for those of you who are a little more code oriented. So as always, this project file will be available on Patreon, but let's go ahead and drop down a CopNet here. Dive inside and let's drop down some constants to start off with. So I'm gonna set these to be RGBs and we're gonna just give them a random color here. And I'm gonna make another one and just change the color. So the first thing that we need to talk about with Wrangles, let's drop one down. And you see we have some inputs here. So that is gonna be controlled by our inputs here. So I can make another one and you see that we get a second one here. Just by default, if you don't have anything put in here, it's gonna be called output 1 and output 2 and input 1 and input 2. Let's take this and make it an RGB for both of these, and we'll leave this as C for our color, and we'll make the second one just C2. And we can wire in our blue and our green in here. If I just set our display flag here, you can see that we are just passing through our colors by default. So that's important to know, and we can overwrite this like we would with any other Wrangle, just processing on like attributes. It's gonna kind of work the same way. So we'll do @C is equal to @C2. And if I go back to our first color there, you can see that we're just passing through our first or our second constant. We're overriding that first one. So whatever we change this to is going to be the color that we get. So if I change this back to C, then we're just passing stuff through again. So let's take this a little bit further and let's use some masks for this. So let's maybe create a couple of inputs here. We'll set these to be mono and we'll call them mask and mask 2. And I'm gonna drop down an SDF setup, which is just a recipe from my HouMats collection of nodes. With those, they're available on Patreon. You can see that right now you get a bunch of different generators and some different utility nodes as well. Super, super useful for creating some different things inside of Cops. I highly recommend you take a look at that. But for this, it's just a recipe. It's not super essential that you grab that for this, because this is just a recipe that creates these two nodes for us. I just include that as part of our HouMats just to save you a little bit of time if you don't want to make them yourself. So we have this mask here. Let's create a duplicate of this. And we're going to just create let's say a different shape, maybe a star. Let's scale this down a little bit and let's wire this into our mask 1, the circle, and then our star into our mask 2. And let's come up here and let's just mix between these two based off of one of those masks. So the way that we can do that is with the lerp function. It's the normal way that you would mix between two values. You can see that we have our input values and then we want to use our third value as our amount. So we're going to do @C as our first value, then @C2 as our second, and then we'll use our mask value as the third. And that's going to determine how much of the second color is being blended into the first. So we can drop down like a mix or a blur, and then we can move this up and you see that we are starting to blend a little bit differently just based off of how this blur is reacting. So we can get rid of that and then we can do some different things with this. So if we wanted to affect the masks, let's say all in one go, and we wanted to change around our mask, we could do @mask is equal to @mask minus @mask2. And now you see we have our circle with our little star being cut out of it here. And I could, let's say, maybe I want to scale that up and change it to be an addition. We can do that too. So all of our normal, add, multiply, divide, all those operations are still going to work like they would in normal Vex. You can just do it all in one node if you'd like to, instead of dropping down like you have your blend node, which has all of these different modes to us. You can do that same sort of thing in Vex if you want. So lots of different things that you can do with these Wrangles inside of Cops. I wanted to take a look at something just a little bit more complex, I guess. And let's drop down a fractal noise to demonstrate this. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to just crank up the amplitude here as well as the size and maybe the contrast as well, just so it's a little bit easier to see kind of what is going on here. And then we can drop down a distort. So normally if you were to drop in our noise into the source and we use like a UV map as our direction, you can see that it's going to not really do much. It's going to scale it up a little bit. Normally we'd use something like a distort by slope, and that's going to drop down the slope direction for us as well. And we'd wire in our height into that. And you can see that we get something, you know, quite a bit differently here. That's because this is our UV map that we're piping in for that direction. You can see that it's quite a bit different than what we have here. So we need to change around what we have in this UV map if we want to affect things differently. So let's do that in a Wrangle here. So let's take this, wire this in, and let's change this to be UV, and we'll call this UV as well. So I'm just going to create a vector value, so vector 2. We'll call this UV just to work on this outside of just writing directly to the UV. And then we can put a float down, so a float, and we'll call this distortion. And we're going to create some sort of like an old school glitch type of an effect with our UV map here. So it's going to distort our overall shape. So let's take a random value based on our Y position of our UV, so UV.Y, and then let's multiply that by our frame number in order to get a random value between 0 and 1. And then we can multiply that again by something else, just a little bit bigger, maybe like 4. And we can take our X value of our UV position and we can add our distortion to that. So plus equals distortion. And then let's apply that distortion to our UV. So at UV is equal to UV. And if we take a look at our distort now, you can see that we have this kind of a distortion that's going on. If I press play, you can see that it is kind of playing through. It's kind of glitching out and giving us something kind of close to an old school type of a glitch effect. So with a little bit more of some massaging of the Wrangle here, let's just take a copy of this. I can pop in some extra stuff here, wire this into our direction, and I'm going to take a look at this distort here. And I'm actually going to just increase the scale here just quite a bit. And I'm going to turn down the maximum steps just to 1. And let's dial this back to, actually, we need to change our resolution because I have our resolution just hard coded in here. So if I take this and set it to maybe like 0.46 for our scale, and I press play now, you can see that we have this sort of like a glitch effect that you'd see in the, I don't know, like old school film type stuff or like a horror thing. You'd see this type of an effect. So there's lots of interesting stuff that you can do with Vex. You just have to play around with it and, you know, use your imagination a little bit. But I wanted to give an introduction of how you can actually use it to do some different things. That way, if you don't want to, you know, use the subtracts and multiplies and stuff inside of cops, you can do it all inside of a Wrangle if you really, really want to. I don't really know which one works faster. I'd have to profile them, and I haven't gone through and done that. But you're more than welcome to if you would like to. But I wanted to show how we can use them if you prefer that method of working inside of cops. If you're a little more of a code-oriented type of a person. But anyways, hopefully this has helped you out. Make sure to check out, like I said, HouMats on my Patreon or Gumroad if you prefer that. There are lots of nodes in here that give you some awesome stuff inside of cops and make things a little bit easier. I'm going to be adding more to them as well, so grab those now and you'll get those as part of it if you're interested. But anyways, thank you guys for watching and have a good day.